So I was showing a friend my Star Wars kit bash greeble set that I have online, and he said, "Hey, why don't you show us how you made some of those parts?" And I thought that is a great idea actually, because I used a lot of different hard surface modeling techniques to build these pieces, and I think this will be a good educational video for anyone out there who's interested in learning hard surface modeling and how I made the stuff. So let's get started. I've got 5 of my favorite pieces here from the Star Wars set. Here we've got some piping. We've got a input output kind of thing for other pipes to plug into, a fan vent, a square vent with a fan, and a square vent. So let's get started on the middle piece, because this is probably one of the first pieces that I modeled. So I'm going to put all these in a collection. So B for box select them all, press M for move, put them in a new collection. I'm going to name it finished pieces. Now I'm going to hide all the pieces except for the one that I want to see, just so I have it for reference. And I'm going to kind of put it over here on the X-axis out of the way. So the basic mesh that we're going to start with to make this fan or vent is a cylinder. So put your cursor in the middle by pressing Shift C and then Shift A to add. Go to cylinder. Open up your options here, and let's give it more than 32 vertices to make it smoother and give us some more geometry to work with. Let's do just 80, I think is a good number. Press period on your numpad to zoom into that selected object. I'm going to go into tab for edit mode, SZ to shrink it or scale it downwards on the Z axis, and I'm going to move it up so it's flat on the ground. So I press numpad 1 to get a flat view on the side, GZ to move it up. And there, it's important you move this in edit mode so that the origin point stays on the bottom. You could move the origin point later, but just to save us time so we don't have to do that later, just move it in edit mode. And be aware of when I'm in edit mode versus object mode, because that will definitely affect how we build this thing. Okay, so let's make this curved edge here to get things started here. In face mode, I'm going to select the top face, S to shrink it, Control R to make a loop cut, click to confirm, and then click again to confirm where it is. Now I'm going to size this up just a little bit, almost to where it's vertical. If I press numpad 1 to get a flat view, I'm going to try, my first try I'm going to do right around here. Now what I'm going to do is press Control B to bevel, and I'm going to use my mouse wheel. You can also use the plus button on your keyboard to add a bunch of extra loop cuts or segments to this bevel. So we've just turned a really harsh, ugly looking edge into a nice smooth round edge. That looks good to me. Press enter to confirm that. Awesome, we're on to a good start. Let's grab this top face up here in face select mode, and I'm going to move it down. So GZ, it's going to move it straight down. Maybe make it flat, go to side view, make it flat right there. Cool. Size it up a little bit, and we're going to give some ridges. This gives some very, very minor level detail. So E to extrude, I for inset, E to extrude, I for inset, E to extrude downwards, I for inset, E extrude downwards. So all those E and I's are just to make some kind of edging ring loop thingies here. Oh, also, here's a cool trick, something I've just recently started doing. If you're in object mode, which is what I'm in right now, there are some interesting view options to help you just make things a little bit more visually appealing and help your eye kind of understand what's where. So open up your options here with this little downward arrow, the viewport shading options, turn on cavity, and you can even turn on shadow if you want. So now we kind of have these, all the sharp edges, which are cavities, highlighted. And you do have some options here. You can turn up the ridges, which is the sharp edges, and the valley, which is, the inside edges. It just helps them highlight and make them more easier to see. All right, what's next? We're going to drop this whole center section to give room for the fan blades. So in edit mode, I'm going to do another I inset and E to extrude down a lot, not all the way through the floor, but just above it. There we go. And I'm going to press I to make an inset. This is going to be kind of the central spoke here. E to extrude upwards, E to extrude upwards again, and then S to shrink this down. Cool. And you can, do some kind of like inset stuff here, shrinking thing, just to give it some cool shapes. I did make, 8 fan blades based on, this octagon in the middle. We're going to go back into edit mode. My 3D cursor is still in the middle. So any shape I add is going to pop in right there. So Shift A, add another cylinder and change this to 8 segments. There we go. S to shrink it down just a little bit bigger than the central hub. SZ, GZ, going to move it up. There we go. That looks good right there. Cool. And now we only want these outer edges. So you can do that one of 2 ways. You can deselect the top and bottom faces, or you can select all the side faces around the edge. I'm going to try holding Alt and select with for me, it's right click, and that did the trick. Sometimes you got to get the angle right. You got to try a few different times, but you can usually alt select and it'll grab a whole edge loop, I think it is, or a ring. I'm not sure terminology. So there we go. I got these guys. Now I'm going to press I for inset and press I again a second time to get an individual inset instead of like a group inset, which does this. A second press of I will do that. Now I want to shrink these and make them really narrow from left to right, if you will. So change this to normals mode. Make sure you're on individual origins. And now if we press S and X, look, we're shrinking individually each face, but also based on the normals direction, because each face has a different normals because they're all facing different directions, all 8 of them. So all of their X axes is the one that I wanted to shrink. If you did Y, you could shrink them all that way, or Z. Well, Z doesn't work because this is a flat face. So X is what I want. So we're going to make some nice skinny fan blades there. Cool. Now we want to extrude them all outwards. So if I press E, it works because I have individual origins and I have normals set. If this doesn't work, make sure you got your settings the same as I do up here. Normals, individual origins, and I'm going to drag my mouse upward to go all the way to the edge right about there. Awesome. Now I want these to look like fan blades, so I'm going to grab these long edges. I'm going to try doing Shift G and then length. So I just selected all the edges the same length, which in this case, it worked. Sometimes it grabs additional faces, like it may grab all these faces, but this length, I guess, is pretty unique and it works. So Shift G, which is select similar. You have a bunch of options here, but length worked for me right here. So I'm going to do Control B for bevel, and I still have a whole bunch of bevel segments from earlier. So I'm just going to use my mouse wheel down and just make it one segment. There we go. So see, this is what I did. I beveled it. So we have like that kind of rounded edge. Cool. Next thing is all these rings and sides. So this is a nice, easy trick. And edit mode, go to edge select mode, and I'm going to press Control R, and I'm going to draw, I'm going to make a loop cut on this kind of base, this floor piece, but I'm going to make a whole bunch of them. So wheel up to make, I don't know how many this is, a lot. Enter, enter. And now you can do Control B for bevel, add one additional segment, and then where you like the width, just choose that, and then press Control minus to shrink your selection down to the middle edge. So before it was this. So what's in the middle? If we subtract the selection from all these segments, it's going to go to that middle edge right there. Now we can just move this straight up. So GZ, there we go. We get some cool kind of circular vents, and that looks great, especially from far away. It's a lot of minor detail. It looks good. All right, a few more things. Let's get this octagon, give it some more shape on top. So I'm going to press I for inset and drop it down. I again to draw all the way to the middle. And then I can grab these edges. Let's try that length again. Oh yeah, see, that didn't work. So I'm just going to manually select all 8 of these. It's not that many. There we go. Oops, there we go. Control B. I'm going to make it one segment. Click to confirm OK, and I'm just going to raise up these new pieces that I made just straight upwards to give it some more kind of structural support looking stuff going on. Cool, that looks good. And I had these little connection things on the outside. I'll show you real briefly how I made that. In edit mode, I'm going to select a few of these faces on the edge. We're just going to rotate it all the way around and copy it. So I'm going to grab these 4 right here. I'm going to duplicate this by typing Shift D, enter. So now we have these exact faces duplicated. They're not connected to anything, which is good. They're just free floating. So if I press escape, they're going to pop right back to where they were originally. Press E to extrude them out together. Cool. And then Control plus to grab all these connected faces. Again, they're not connected to the main fan. They're separate. So if we do Control plus, it grows the selection just to this little piece right here. Press 7 for an above view. Make sure your 3D cursor is in the middle. Change your pivoting point to 3D cursor. You can go back to global. And now here's where we're going to duplicate this all the way around. So if you want to do any detail editing, do it now. Like you want to add some little, minor details here. I don't know. I had a little pipe on mine. So I'm just going to grab all these. Again, press Control L to grab that whole thing. And now once you're done making your minor details, let's start copying this around. So with 3D cursor in the middle, 3D cursor is your pivot point. Press Shift D, R, and in this case, I'm going to do 45. Look at that. It moved over to the other section. press enter, and now Shift R, Shift R, 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 R. All that Shift R does is repeats the last process you did. And that last process was Shift D and then R to rotate. So let me back up and do it again. Grab that whole little piece I made, make sure there's just one. Yep. So Shift D, R, 45, enter. That whole thing I just did there is considered one step by Blender. So Shift R duplicates that over and over. And now we have 8 of them. Same piece, all going around. Awesome. Now to make these smooth, press, for me, it's W. I do shade smooth. You can also find that in the search function, which is F3. You can do shade smooth if it didn't pop up for you like it did me. And we got some funny, weird looking faces. To fix that, go to your object properties, go to normals, and turn on auto smooth. There we go. And now the rounded edges are smooth and the sharp edges are sharp. Looks awesome. Let's move on to the next piece, which is this coupler or this kind of pipe conduit piece. Again, we're going to start with a cylinder. So Shift A, cylinder. Let's give it 80 pieces there. Shrink it down real nice and narrow because it starts with a very short base. Press numpad 1, GZ, and kind of put it right on top of the origin point where the red line is. That's what I call the floor. I'll move this out of the way a little bit more. Get over there. Okay. All right, in face select mode, let's I for inset, move it up just a little bit with GZ. E for extrude, B for bevel. We can bevel these edges a little bit, give some nice round edges. Remember, you don't want a bunch of sharp edges everywhere because that's just kind of dangerous and unrealistic. Let's inset to make a ridge, E to drop it down a little bit, I to inset it again, E, can bevel that. That's the basic part for this. Now I'm going to do a similar thing that we did earlier with the duplicating of the part around the center point. So I'm going to grab these 4 pieces, Shift D, enter, and I'm going to extrude them out and then extrude again and maybe drop these down, GZ, just to give a cool little shape. Maybe I can go in here and add some more little minor details, extrude it up. There we go. So this is its own, it's in the same mesh, but it's its own like part rather, it's not connected. So I'm going to duplicate this 4 times around this from the center point, which is a 3D cursor. So make sure you got 3D cursor right there. Shift D, R90, enter, and then Shift R, R. There we go. Cool. But I chose to break up the circular design by adding a square piece in the middle. So let's add a cube, shrink it down. Make sure it's not popping out the bottom, which it is. SZ to scale it on the Z axis. Let's move this face down. Let's bevel it a little bit. Make another ridge. There we go. Cool. And then I had these kind of Mario looking tubes coming up. So let's make another cylinder. And this one doesn't have to be 80 because this is a really small part of the model. So let's do 16. Shrink it way down. Oop, it disappeared. Shrink it down. GZ to move it up. Let's add a connecting piece on the end. So E, enter, S for scale. Oops, look at this. We're scaling based on what? The 3D cursor, which we don't want right now. So change this to individual origins. So S to scale, E, Control B to bevel, I, E to extrude down. There we go. Got our Super Mario tube. And we'll smooth it out with our shade smooth trick again. So W, click on shade smooth, turn on auto smooth down here. And I'm going to make 4 of these. So Control L grabs the whole linked vertices of one part. S7 for above view. I'm going to put it over here in a corner, try to get it in a good corner position. And then let's duplicate it around the 3D cursor. Shift D, R90, Shift R, Shift R. There we go. They're not quite as big as these. You can maybe size them up or something, but you get the point. I'm going to make a few more little square details here. I'll go back to individual origins. There we go. I'm going to make it narrow, put it just below the surface. Pop it up again, and then shrink this on, I guess that's the Y-axis. Cool. Move it right here, and then let's copy it around the 3D cursor. So select 3D cursor, Shift D, R90, Shift R, Shift R. Awesome. Nice little touch. All right, let's do some piping. This is probably something that a lot of you were looking forward to because pipes are so cool, but they're a lot of work. So I'll try not to make this part too long. But Blender does give us some nice controls to make these elbows and these bends in the pipes. So let's get started. I'm going to move this a little bit closer. There we go. So let's start with our first pipe, Shift A, and let's keep these at 32 vertices so they'll be nice and smooth. Tab in edit mode, shrink it down. RY 90. So we just rotate it 90 degrees. Let's stretch it on the X, so SX. And here's how you do these bending edges. We're going to use the spin tool. So you need to select the face that you want to bend. Press 7 for above view, or depending on what direction you're going. If you're going to bend upwards, press 1 or 3 to get a flat view. But I'm going to curve to the left or right. So 7 for an above view. You have to drop your 3D cursor in an exact spot. And it's best to make it, perpendicular or parallel to the face. So I'm going to show you what happens if I do it really close right here. The 3D cursor is right there, because the spin tool will rotate this face or stretch it out along the 3D cursor. Now the options themselves are a little bit hidden. You have to go over here to the tool options menu or dialog. Now, if you notice, this circle is going around the 3D cursor, so it's going to curve that way. So click and drag, and there we go. That's how we make the bend. But there's two things you need to know. If you hold Control, it'll do exact angles. So I'm going to do a 90-degree angle. And the other thing to know is that the amount of segments, or the smoothness of it, is right here. So if I do undo and make this just like 3 segments, watch. Boop, boop, boop. We only got 3 segments, which might be a look you're going for like some aluminum piping or something. But if you want it nice and smooth, do anywhere from like 12 to 20, something like that. Oops, 7. There we go. So click and hold Control with my other hand. There we go. Then you can extrude from there and make, the next piece. But if you do the cursor far away from your face, watch what happens. Remember earlier I had it right about there. What if I do it over here and then make that? The angle is much wider. So if you want a nice pinched turn, then you're going to do it close. If you want it to kind of cover some area and go around something larger, then that's how you do it. Make your cursor farther away. So let's continue on. I'm going to press I for inset, E, go back to individual origins so I can kind of scale up these faces whenever I want. There we go. Now we can kind of reuse some of these parts and save ourselves some time. So I'm just going to grab this whole piece right here and then Shift D, enter. And I'm just going to actually size it down and move it over here, rotate it. Basically make it look like I did a whole bunch of work when really I'm just recycling pieces. I'm going to show you how to do a curve over something. So I'm going to grab this whole edge loop, which look, it's open. It's not a closed face. So I don't have to, but I could make it a face if I wanted to by pressing F for fill. To select the whole ring, I didn't show you how. If you hold Alt and then select one of the edges, it'll grab the whole edge ring or loop there. I don't get my terminology correct. So I want to jump over this. So I'm going to press 1 for a side view, and I can't see anything. So let's turn on our X-ray. There we go. So this is the big thick pipe we want to jump over. So first we have to turn upwards and then we can go over it. So again, number 1 gives me the right view. I'm going to make it a tight turn, change my axis to Y, click and hold, and I'll do a 90-degree turn right here. And then I want this to go over. So instead of turning here, which would make a tight turn, I'm going to try clicking over here, kind of in the center of this big pipe. Let's see what happens now. Click and hold. Oh yeah, that's nice. Cool. Now, for curves that cover a larger area, you may want to add more segments. So I'll do 32 so it's smoother. There we go. And then a tight turn to get back to ground level. Put it back to 16 segments. Click, holding Control. There we go. We're back to ground level. And now we can E for extrude and carry on with our happy pipe making ways. Awesome. If you want to add a whole bunch of little like rings, this is how you do it. Grab a face that you want to turn into rings. Ooh, I'm on a face mode. There we go. Grab a face, Shift D, size it up, move it into place, E for extrude, and then grab this whole little ring you just made by pressing Control L. And then we're going to duplicate it on the, X axis. So Shift D, X, and put it right there. And then we're going to use our Shift R repeat trick. So Shift R, 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 R. There we go. That's how you make some ribs or rings or whatever those are called. Ridges, I don't know. Ribby ring ridges. So I'm going to select this face. I'm going to drop my 3D cursor right there by pressing Shift S. Cursor to selected. Shift A. Make the sphere. Make it bigger than the tube. And now you can grab other tube pieces and kind of copy and paste them in. So we'll grab that. Shift D. Shrink it a lot so it's not as recognizable. Cool. I'm going to grab these, but if I do this, look, it only grabs the top because it couldn't grab the bottom. But if you turn on X-ray, you can basically look through an object and select all the pieces. So now it's got the whole darn thing. Cool, including the ridges, which are not technically connected. So Shift D, put it right there. Oops. Awesome, turn off X-ray because it makes everything transparent. And there you go. Just kind of go crazy. I mean, not too crazy. I like to try to imagine, like, what is this piece of piping doing? Is there coolant running through it? Is there electricity going through wires? Is this carrying plasma or hot gas or oxygen? And try to imagine what parts would need to be along the trail of these pipes. Should there be like vents? Should there be release valves? Should there be inlets and outlets? Things to plug in. Maybe on a spacewalk outside the spaceship, you need to plug something in, add some ports to connect things to, make them strong with support pieces and screws and rivets and stuff like that, just to make it look more realistic. All right, let's move on to the next piece because I don't want to spend all day remaking that. All right, this is a classic Star Wars piece. If you are a hardcore Millennium Falcon fan, you will recognize the fan on the back of the Millennium Falcon, which is this. So there's a whole bunch of these scattered all over. This is really simple. Let's Shift A and make a cube. Tab into edit mode. Let's shrink it down a little bit. Stretch it along the X-axis. Maybe not. Maybe by like 2. You can type in numbers. So SX2 will multiply the X-axis by 2. So that's good. SZ to make it really short. Let's be diligent and put it on top of the origin point. There we go. All right. And let's give it this raised piece. So I for inset, E for extrude upwards. Awesome. Now we're going to add some subdivisions to make these square cutouts. So we do that with a loop cut. So Control R to make a loop cut and slide it up here somewhere right around there. Go to face mode and grab this face. But first we're going to inset it to give it kind of a border. And then we're going to subdivide this. So space bar, type in subdivide. There we go. And I'm going to add an extra layer. There we go. So we got 9 squares, 3 by 3. They're already selected for us. So press I. And I'm getting individual origin. If you don't, you need to press I a second time. Remember, I is individual origin. There we go. And then just E to extrude them down. Easy as that. All right, let's make this cylindrical fan over here with a twist. In edit mode, Shift A, add a cylinder. Whoa, it's really big. Let's shrink it down. Make it short. Make sure it doesn't pop out the bottom. There we go. Shrink it down a little bit more. All right. That's good enough for me. I'm going to move this top face down, extrude it, and shrink it. I for inset, E to extrude it down. Don't go below the cube face, but keep it right above it. I for inset, and then we're going to make the central hub for the fan blades right here. You're probably curious how I did this twist. It's stupid easy. I'm just going to rotate this face, RZ. Oh yeah, look at that. And don't go too far because then things start overlapping and causing polygon issues. So don't go past the point of no return, but I think that's good right there. I'm going to rotate this back a little bit. I feel like the rotation was a little bit extreme. I'm going to go to edge select mode, press C for circle select, and just drag all the way around. I only want these edges. And I'm going to actually bevel these. So Control B. Well, that's too much bevel. I just want them to be very narrow. If you go too far, they'll start overlapping. So go to the point just before they overlap. If you need to zoom in, you can hold Shift to make it more controlled. And now you can press E to extrude these up, and you get a nice thin kind of fan blade thing going on. And I'm going to grab this central hub right here, extrude it up, and then maybe bevel the edge. There we go. To get these little square bumps around the edge, you could possibly put screws on there or buttons or something. I'm going to grab this top face, Shift D, Enter. I'm going to go to an above view and press S to shrink it down. I'm just going to make one of them, and then I'm going to basically turn that into 4 of them. Okay, so E for extrude, extrude again, shrink it on any of the axes you want, X or Y. Press Control L to grab the whole thing, and you can press Shift D to duplicate, and then choose an axis to slide it along. Once you duplicate something, you can move it on the axis. Shift D for those, move it on the X, right there. And there you have it, the classic Millennium Falcon fan piece. All right, the last piece we're gonna make is this square vent that's got this cool kind of inverted curve. We're gonna start with the classic default cube, tab into edit mode, SZ. We're gonna make it really narrow to give a good base. I'm gonna grab one of these little one of these edges and Shift G select by length, which gives me all of them. I'm going to bevel this to give the starting curve shape. So Control B, roll my wheel upwards to give it a nice smooth multi-segment piece. Click and click to confirm. Go to face select mode. I'm going to press I, go down to about there, and then E to extrude straight upwards. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bevel this edge, but because it's an inverted, I don't know, crevice or a concave piece, it's going to do the bevel in the opposite direction that we're used to. So Alt select one of these edges and it gives you the whole loop around the square. Control B for bevel, and look at that. Oh, that's so pretty. You can increase the segments if you need to. I'm going to go to right about there. Grab this top face, bevel this the normal direction, and we don't need that many segments, so I'm just going to go down to like maybe 4. There we go. Now I'm going to insert this top face, but watch what happens if I insert it too far. These curved edges start overlapping, so don't go too far with that bevel, with that inset. E to extrude downwards to give the hole for the vent. And to make these vent pieces are super easy. I'm just going to make a new cube and shrink it down like super small, but I need to raise it up. So very, very small. Now stretch it really long on one direction. Stretch it upwards to give some height to it. And once I'm happy with the thickness and the height of it, I'm going to get it into the first position. We're going to make a whole array of these. So put it right here. Shift D, X. Oop, X is the wrong direction. Let's do Y. And put it right next to the first one. And then you've made 2 vent pieces, right? Whoop-de-doo. But now when you press Shift R, it's going to repeat that over and over. Now this is going to add a lot of faces to your model. So if you're trying to stay low poly and you're trying to be careful with how many polygons you make, or if you're going to make like, 32 of these vents in your spaceship, maybe not do this step. Find another, less polygon happy way to make this. But this is how I'm doing it for this tutorial. I'm not going to care about polygons for now. I want to make the grill go in the opposite direction. I'm going to use my circle select tool and grab all of these vent fins very carefully. Control L to grab the whole piece, or all of them. Now press 7 for above view, Shift D, enter, and then R90. Oops, we didn't do median point. We rotated all the fins individually 90 degrees, but we want to rotate them all together in the same way, 90 degrees. So select median point, R90, there we go. But they're at the same height as the first fin, so I like to move them down or up. So GZ, there we go. That also gives some nice depth and pattern to it. All right, I've got these kind of curvy pieces on the edge. The way I made those is real easy. I just did a edge loop, so Control R. I'm going to make 3 of them, enter. And then I'm going to click on this and then hold Control to grab the whole kind of connected line. Shift to start again, Control down here, Shift select here, Control click there. All right, now let's Control B to bevel them, and we only want one segment right there. So select the first one and then hold Control click. Shift click here, Control click there, Shift click there, Control click there, and then you can E for extrude to pop these guys out. But this is kind of like a weird direction, so I'm probably going to shrink this. S, go to individual origins, S to scale, and yeah, that looks good. It's not perfect, but it's not sticking out in weird ways. And then we want to duplicate this around there. So grab those pieces we just made, Shift D, R180, rotating around the 3D cursor, and there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some cool tricks. If you have any questions, write down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe.